Welcome everyone to my channel. Today I have a wonderful guest, as you can see, Dorota Gudaniec. She is a naturopath, a woman who looks for practical solutions, a mother who didn't give up when her son was dying, a girl who now helps other people by producing hemp oils, sharing information about how people can help themselves. And in fact, in Poland, she is considered the best expert in this field. Welcome, Dorotka.
Hello, Natalia. Thank you for such kind words, but I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I don't know if I'm the best, but I'm definitely very reliable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dear, please tell me, how did your adventure with cannabis even begin? Because somehow you came across this topic. It crossed your path. Tell us that story.
Of course. It's always the case that the topics we deal with usually concern us very, very personally. Well, my story began 11 years ago when my son, who is a child with a disability, a child who was born with Down syndrome, but Down syndrome was never any kind of problem, and I want to emphasize that very strongly. The problem turned out to be epilepsy. Very quickly, it became clear that it was drug-resistant epilepsy. And despite very intensive pharmacological therapy, which over the course of 4.5 years basically involved 23 neurological medications, so you can imagine that all possible options were used, and the result was that at some point my son simply took a turn for the worse. Nothing worked anymore. Earlier, there was also a ketogenic diet for several months, which gave us a lot of really positive results. And suddenly, for no apparent reason, he just collapsed. He ended up in the ICU. He ended up in a condition called thiopental coma. And during this coma, absolutely everything that could possibly happen happened. There was sepsis, there was thrombosis, there was pericarditis, and inflammation of the mastoid process of the temporal bone pyramid. And what was actually even worse was that despite the coma, Max kept twitching the whole time. And honestly, every day I heard that there was no chance for him, that I had to accept that children die. That sometimes I heard some really terrible words from the doctors, like, for example, don't get used to this, he won't live long anyway. Or in a softer way, it was like, children die, you're still young, you can have another one. So it's like, as if you could just buy yourself a new purse, right? And in those circumstances, I just didn't really want to give up. Not really, like any mother, right? I just couldn't imagine having to watch my son die and just stand by helplessly. And I was just looking for any possible inspiration. A lot of things were happening then, really like meditation, bioenergy therapy, and really a lot of fantastic things. But, the room for maneuver is very limited. You can do it while being in the ICU. And that's when I found out that there is such a thing as medical marijuana, that a girl in the United States who was in a similar condition to my Max was saved by cannabis. So I grabbed onto it like a drowning person grabs a straw. I just wanted to try it for him. So I ran to the doctors and said, well, there's something like this, please. And they said, have you lost your mind, Mom, right? This is abnormal. This is impossible. We are not going to bring drugs into the ICU. Things like that, but I'm speeding up this story, because it's been told many times already. I wouldn't want to bore your listeners here. But basically, it ended with me asking what would have to happen for them to have that kind of dialogue, that kind of conversation with me and agree to try it. Of course, for Max's treatment, it turned out that we needed approval from the Ministry of Health. We got that approval. We found one, really just one among thousands, you could say, a doctor who decided to write the prescription and submit all the necessary applications. My husband, under threat of being banned from coming home because he wouldn't survive coming back without that document. He got the minister's approval, yes. How he did it, I still don't know to this day. And it turned out that, in a really short time, Hemp, when I came to the doctors with that little package of herbs, they shook their heads again and said, well, there's no procedure for this. How could I even imagine giving something like that, that there could be so many interactions, that I could harm this child, that he was in critical condition? Machines were breathing for him, the ventilator was breathing for him, and through his veins, from 14 different infusion pumps. Infusion pumps were pumping various substances, so he really had an incredible cocktail of everything. And here, a crazy mother comes in and wants to add, right, cannabis on top of it. And, on one hand, I understand the doctor's resistance and I understand that. But on the other hand, those same doctors, they said that Max wouldn't survive, that he had no chance, that he had less than a 1% chance of survival. So what was I supposed to do in such circumstances? I think any mother would take the risk. And the next day, because I couldn't give it to him the first day, the next day I brewed some tea.
You just brewed tea from cannabis, right?
Exactly, an infusion. I just made an infusion. I made an infusion, packed it into a few syringes, put them in my bag, and off I went. And when no one was looking, I injected it through the gastric tube because the tube was used for flushing the stomach. Well, now it might sound kind of trivial, especially since I'm even smiling a little, right? It's just that back then I really didn't know if I might kill my own son because they scared me so much. But on the other hand, I knew that if I didn't do something, I would never forgive myself for not having done anything. Because if he's gonna die anyway, and they keep telling me there's no chance, then I really felt very determined. It was just, I think any mother would do it if she had any chance. So I did it and I watched. I was dying of fear that I might have hurt him, but I helped. And since it helped, well, it would be good to know what helped, right? So I started to get really interested in this topic. I started to explore it on every possible level, meaning I read, watched, listened, searched, and traveled. I went to Israel several times. I went to Slovenia. I went to the Czech Republic, and there I met with specialists. I'm also a founder, by the way. I was with my husband at a foundation for children with disabilities, so I acted as the president of the foundation. So doors opened for me because, as a mother, not everyone would necessarily want to meet with me, right? A mother, what's a mother, right? A mother is just, a mother. But as the president of the foundation, well, there's a possibility of establishing international cooperation, right? That's how I traveled the world. I brought in specialists from around the world. Up to now, I've already organized 8 international conferences. And I deepened my knowledge everywhere I could, but above all, I practiced. Above all, it's about practice. And so, thank God 11 years have passed.
Great. Listen, you're amazing. Of course, every mother will fight for her child as much as she can. But you did something that's really unimaginable. You went against the system, not caring about the procedures in place because your only procedure was saving your own child. And where did the idea even come from, since there are so many hemp products and oils out there? What made you decide to start making your own?
But it's a natural consequence and, just the natural order of things. When Max fortunately survived and when I started gaining this knowledge, it suddenly turned out that, hemp, just like everything else, can be of very different quality. Just simply, it's like with shoes. You buy shoes, the price doesn't always reflect the quality, right? Sometimes you pay for the brand, sometimes for the actual quality, and sometimes what's really good isn't particularly advertised. And, I bought what was available, but sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And I couldn't let my child, who, was miraculously snatched from death, literally from the grave, to go through that kind of roller coaster again. That sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes the product is available, sometimes it's not. How can that be? So I just decided, to keep the momentum going, and I found a laboratory that started producing only for Max. The beginning wasn't commercial. I don't have any intention of starting a cannabis business. Natomiast, but I needed to have a product, and one that I could stand behind completely, one that would be safe, one that I could safely give to my own child. And that's how it started, because first there was one laboratory. Then, as my knowledge and awareness grew, I started looking for new laboratories that had even greater capabilities. And now we've reached the stage where we work with a laboratory that produces my products to pharmaceutical standards under the supervision of all the relevant institutions. The give, but above all, I check it very thoroughly, very thoroughly. So, it's not enough to just have a simple CBD content certificate, because to have CBD content, you can just add isolate and there will also be CBD. Yes, and I actually have extracts from hemp that really grew on organic fields. Yes, where we really check if there are any contaminants. So the law doesn't impose standards for testing everything, but my morality and my ethics and my love for my son require it from me. So I simply test everything that can be tested. We test 400 items again. No one does that. No one is that crazy.
But it's great that you mention it, because I read that hemp is especially absorbent when it comes to various substances found in the environment, including toxic ones. That's why it's so important what kind of soil the hemp grows on, whether there were any contaminants there, or even if it was previously used for agricultural crops, where chemicals are sometimes used as well, because the hemp will absorb all of that and then people will introduce it into their bodies. So
Natalia, people say that hemp is a sacred plant. We call it Santa Herba. And now, not to get into any religious or spiritual topics, the sacredness of this plant really comes from the fact that it has so many properties. And one of these properties is its absorption through the taproot system. Hemp has what's called a taproot system. It is rooted very deeply. It's long and extends deep and has lots of tiny little offshoots. Thanks to this, it can help us counteract hydrological drought, but at the same time, it can also reclaim the soil for us by absorbing, among other things, all the compounds that pollute the ground. And now hemp is used to reclaim land, for example, after contamination. Even nuclear contamination, I'm not even talking about other chemical ones. So it really matters a lot where this hemp was grown. And you have to check that. Nowadays, you can't just take someone's word for it. Today everyone wants to sell their product. It's both the farmer and everyone else. So you have to check, and check again. So the highest form of trust is verification.
Okay, but when it comes to the impact on health, what would you mention? Because, for example, on my channel, there are different people, but very often they are people over 40 who already have some health issues, some problems. They're looking for solutions. Maybe someone hasn't really explored this topic yet. Maybe for someone, this will be completely new. Tell me, what can hemp generally help with? In what situations can they support our health?
Thank you for this question, because it's an extremely important question, but to answer it, I need to approach it from a slightly different angle. Well, the paradigm we live in today is based on treating diseases. Right? You'll agree with me that when we have some condition, we go get treatment for high blood pressure, right? Or we treat cancer, or as I sometimes say,
we treat the diagnosis.
Yes. You see, when it comes to cannabis, we have to move away from that paradigm, because cannabis, to answer the question from that point of view, treats everything. It sounds ridiculous. If something claims to be for everything, it's likely for nothing. So you have to understand that. The point is that cannabis primarily affects the endocannabinoid system. And that's a kind of structure in our bodies, ours and not just ours, because plants don't have it, but all vertebrate animals do. And yes, we have an endocannabinoid system, which unfortunately we can't see with the naked eye. Right? Because we can quickly define the digestive system, can't we? Or the respiratory system. And the endocannabinoid system is a receptor system. And you could say that it is a system that manages the functioning of all other systems, keeping us in biological balance. So it's a system that through receptors and neurotransmitters communicates between all the parts of our body. So if we have a healthy endocannabinoid system and we are attacked by a microorganism, for example, a bacterium, our immune system will be the first to respond to it. And thanks to the endocannabinoid system, the immune system knows what to do, right? And it has the resources for it. But if the endocannabinoid system is impaired, the immune system might not do its job in time. Do you understand? It won't react in time, and as a result of this lack of reaction, an infection may occur. This is quite simplified, but that's basically how it works. And now our well-being depends on countless processes, right? We're not able to control these processes. What can we control? We control whether we feel like drinking or eating, or whether we want to go to the bathroom, right? But all those enzymatic processes, biochemical, hormonal ones, we don't consciously control. We are not able to. Among other things, that's what the endocannabinoid system is responsible for. And now, if it becomes impaired, this impairment can be the result of, I'll show you a study. Well, it's some kind of switch, right? But let's assume this is a receptor, right? And this is a wire that's supposed to connect to that receptor. If either the receptor is broken or the wire is missing, the information won't flow. Do you understand? It won't. And that's where cannabis comes in to help us. Because cannabis contains chemical compounds that are exactly the same. They are analogous to those compounds, to those neurotransmitters that we have in our bodies. So here we have endocannabinoids, and here in cannabis we have phytocannabinoids, and they are exactly the same. They fit together even though they come from different sources, right? So I'm saying this, of course, in very general terms right now, because when we get into the details, individual compounds like CBD, THC, and CBG do different things, right? But that's the general idea. So if we provide something to the body which isn't in biological balance because we feel we're not in perfect shape, and that's also very relative, right? What does perfect shape even mean, right? With cannabis, we can simply maintain ourselves in the best possible balance. That's kind of the purpose of cannabis. And now you asked about which conditions. Actually, with any condition, because in a way, every condition is a disturbance of biological balance. On a general level, when we go down to the details, we are able to manage it, right? So we can direct our actions more towards the nervous system, more towards the hormonal system, or more towards the immune system. But if we think about it, practically almost all diseases, actually all diseases, are closely connected to either the immune system or the nervous system in different ways, right? To different degrees, or to the hormonal system.
It's very complex. Everything is connected.
And the endocannabinoid system is actually the boss of all bosses, like the conductor of the world's largest orchestra. But even the best conductor can't play when the orchestra has broken instruments. That's why, even if we take care of the endocannabinoid system, it doesn't relieve us of the responsibility to detox, to nourish, to oxygenate the body, to hydrate, right? To provide nutrients above all. So it's like it all comes together. That's why, in my mind, in my awareness, in my practice, I never pose a threat to any naturopath or doctor, and vice versa, because we complement each other perfectly. I, bringing this awareness about the endocannabinoid system, am in no conflict with the actions of naturopaths specializing, for example, like you, in detoxification, for instance, yes. Or someone else who specializes in regulating and supporting the nervous system, right? With the help of supplements. There's no contradiction here. Moreover, there is absolutely no contradiction with strictly medical treatment either. Because again, medications, as we know, are used primarily for intervention. If it were otherwise, there wouldn't be any chronic diseases. So at the intervention level, you can't say that all medications are bad, because sometimes you have to save a person's life first in order to save their health later. right? And all of this will also fit together beautifully. So, yes, I think that anyone who watches this program and feels that something is still missing or hasn't found the right solution can get additional support from phytocannabinoid therapy.
That's great because our viewers really need to understand that when we talk about herbs and their effects, we mean medicinal herbs also have healing and therapeutic effects. Of course, we can use them in the form of herbs, but we can also use them as ready-made supplements. It's important to know that supplements are not medications. It's our duty to make that clear. A supplement helps and supports our body. And here, what you said about taking a holistic approach to everything, I actually really like the name itself, dietary supplement. It's something that complements not just our diet, but our overall lifestyle. Many factors influence whether we are healthy or sick. And it's not just about someone putting all the responsibility on a supplement or on herbs, no matter how wonderful they are, but also about taking responsibility for their own health. Yes, Dorotka, I have a question for you as an expert because I've come across people who sure have never heard of cannabis, but there are also people who have used cannabis. And there are absolutely different effects and different approaches among people. Someone says they didn't feel any effects at all when using a supplement based on hemp oil, or they bought what they thought were very high quality pure hemp oils and still didn't feel anything. Other people say, I felt a bit nauseous after that, so I didn't continue taking it. But there are people who have truly spectacular results. And now a question for you. Tell me, what could this be related to? How do you see it?
First of all, I have a saying that the devil is in the details. If we're talking about supporting the body, it would be good to first know exactly what we want to achieve and how we'll know that things have improved. It's kind of like this. People often come in, for example, and have very specific expectations like, I have a cough, so I'll take some supplement and expect the cough to go away. But a cough is the result of an entire process. It's just one element that comes at the end of a certain process. It manifests as a cough. But before that, we might have a problem with the immune system, for example, or with various other issues. We could talk about this for several hours and probably still not have enough time. So first of all, I always try to define what the person used it for. Secondly, what did they use? Because we're talking about oil. Oil is a very general term, so it's really about the quality of the preparation. The third thing is the issue related to the cannabis itself. There is no such extraction method, because if we have oil, there must have been some kind of extraction. I assume it was actually an extraction from the plant, and not some synthetic substance added in powder form. That could also be the case. Someone bought such an oil, and perhaps that's exactly what they were dealing with. But let's assume, of course, that it was oil from the plant. Now look, how many ways do you know to brew coffee, and how will that coffee taste?
Well, a lot, a lot. You can make it Turkish style. You can brew it with boiling water, coffee machines, and so on.
Of course, and now look, for example, you like espresso and I like it Turkish style. So if we switch, it probably won't taste good to us anymore because we have our own preferences, our own habits, but we're still talking about the same coffee. And now it's exactly the same with cannabis. If we use the CO2 method, which is one of the most popular methods, the CO2 method, also known as supercritical, is wonderful, but it has its pros and it also has its cons. So it may happen that you take a high quality CO2 oil and it might not work for you because that particular preparation might not contain what your body needs. And unfortunately, this was impaired simply at the production level. For example, there's the alcohol extraction method. It's a very good method, but again, it's not for everyone because it also has its pros and cons. So, for example, an excess of chlorophyll might harm you, which we don't remove as much with the alcohol method as we do with the CO2 method, for instance. Just so you know, I'm only one person and I don't want this to seem like an ad, since that's not my intention. But I don't know of another company that makes their product using 3 independent extraction methods. The point is to combine them into one, because each method takes something away from us, while another gives us something else. So if someone said it didn't work for them, I always believe that, of course, because it's not about denying it, but about checking what could be causing it. So it could be because the needs of that particular body weren't met, or it could be due to quality. Może również wynikać. It could also be due to something like the way it's taken. You see, with cannabis, the thing is that cannabis is really cool, but it gets metabolized by our bodies very quickly as a substance. There are lab studies on when that effective biological activity starts and ends. And you see, statistics say that cannabis is metabolized within up to 6 hours in laboratory conditions. So there were a number of conditions met to get that average. But now tell me, what kind of laboratory is your body?
Everyone definitely has their own individual one.
And now you see, here's another paradox that people don't know about. So cannabis is lipophilic, which in plain English means it's fat-loving. And now the paradox is that a person who has more body fat needs a much smaller dose of cannabis. And often when we think in general terms, we say, he's a big guy, so let's probably give him more. But we give him more and he actually feels worse. That's because he got too much since he accumulates it. On the other hand, if we have, for example, a person who struggles with spasticity, meaning someone with cerebral palsy, or another form of neurological problem that manifests as spasticity, because his metabolism is so fast and he simply doesn't have any body fat. So such a person will need not only a lot more cannabis, but will also need it much more often. Meanwhile, the world is governed by marketing rules, right? So let me ask you a question, Natalia, if I may. If you were given a product, you have 2 bottles, 2 little bottles like this, product A and product B. And on product A, it says to use it twice a day, and on product B, 4 times a day. So which product would you choose? You're not an expert, you don't know anything, just use your common sense?
Yes, I think that an average person looking at this who doesn't know how it works or why and how to use it would just think, well, twice a day is definitely more convenient because 4 times a day, when, after all, people work and are busy. So, of course, twice a day, that must be an even better product.
Exactly. And you see, that's something that I don't know if I can say something like that on your channel, but that's just marketing bullshit. That's just deceiving the customer because it sounds good from a marketing standpoint. It's marketing spin. It's just that from the body's point of view, unfortunately, it's bad news, very bad news. Because if a person really needs therapeutic saturation so that some process can happen, there's no such substance that will work if we give it just once, right? So if we want to start a therapeutic process, we have to saturate the body. And we won't saturate it if we give something in the morning and evening, but there's a gap in the middle. You know, it will be constant intervention, 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 intervention. It will have some effects, but these won't be effects that will be satisfying. However, it sounds better from a marketing perspective. This is another example or reason why something might not work. You know, and the most obvious reason is that there is no panacea in the world. That's it. There are situations that we won't solve with the help of cannabis. And there are situations we can solve. The human body is not, you know, a Rubik's Cube where you just learn how to make certain moves and you'll be able to solve every puzzle. We are very complex. We forget that when we nourish our body, we are more than just a body. So if you are suffering from any illness, we need to look at it from the perspective of psychobiology as well. Illness is also a continuation, a consequence of our life, our thinking, our behavior, and our perception of reality. This in turn shapes our emotions. I often show a triangle where one side of the triangle represents our biology. And in this area, we use medications, surgery, radiotherapy, supplements, nutrition, that's biology. But a human is more than just biology. We have this intangible area because you can't really touch a feeling. You can't touch the impression that, I don't know, seeing an exhibition had on you. You can't touch the attitude you have towards the government, for example. You can't touch it with your finger. But the resources you have on this side and the resources you have on that side determine how you will experience certain things, how you will feel them, what your emotions will be, and how you will experience stress. An emotion is an individual reaction to a given stimulus. The stimulus is usually neutral. Basically, it's always neutral, but the reaction is adequate to what's here and what's here. If here you are well fed, nourished, rested, relaxed, your relationships are in order, you're in a good relationship, you have a good job, everything is nice, you are liked, and above all, you like yourself. Then if you spill coffee on your keyboard, you probably won't be happy, but you'll survive. You'll just say, it happens, that's life, I'm not perfect, I'll buy myself a new one. But if here you're tired, malnourished, infested with parasites, and on top of that some illness has come along, and you have, I don't know, conflict all around you, your husband is cheating on you with a bus full of Arabs, and on top of that, you've lost your money. Someone punctured your tire, your cat peed on the carpet, and on top of all that, you spilled coffee on your keyboard. How are you supposed to handle all that? You just want to log out, right? Bo jeszcze się kawa rozlała. So it's really, individual. When I work with people who come to me, my job isn't to just sell them extracts. It's not like that because anyone can buy extracts. I won't forbid anyone. After all, they don't need my permission to buy a supplement. It's the same as with your work. I suspect that's how it is, that if you talk about detox and you have some detox methods, you won't forbid anyone from using them. But the devil is in the details. That person, if guided, will have different results. And you see, it's like this. I think that in your work, it's the same as in mine, that you come across a lot of people who say, Ms. Natalia, I've already dewormed myself 80 times and it didn't help at all, right? But if only they had dewormed themselves properly at least once. It's the same with me. I've already used hemp and it didn't help. But which hemp, at what dose, in what sequence, and for what purpose at all? Do you understand? And then it really becomes clear what it's all about. Did this person really have the intention to help themselves? Was it really well chosen? Does he really understand the processes involved? Because it's worth understanding certain things. And I also know very well that you can act without understanding right from the very beginning. But unfortunately, it generates a lot of stress. And I set myself a life mission that no one has to anymore. I mean, maybe not no one, because I can't help everyone in the world, right? But I want to act and work in such a way that the people who come to me don't have to go through what I went through when I was treated like an object, kind of like you probably watched that short film with our beloved, the late Danuta Saflarska. Let them come in. Let them undress. Do you know this? Right? Well, we won't keep quoting because we know what it's about. So I work with people because, first of all, I love myself and I love people. I love helping them. Not because I'm an altruist, but simply because you can do something good even in today's times. Above all, you can regain your own sense of agency. Regain your own personhood. That's what I teach. And extracts are an excellent tool. I have been using extracts for many, many years. My son is alive thanks to these extracts, and he really lives well. He turned 16 and now he will soon be 17 years old. He is a child who is still a disabled boy, but he is a lively and happy boy. I'm glad that the people who come to me say that they simply regain hope, that they feel like they're getting wind in their sails, that something can still be done. I believe that there is always something that can be done, that as long as a person is alive, you must not take away their hope, but you also must not give any false hope. Well, because deceiving people it simply should be punishable. But giving a person, or rather reminding a person, reminding them that they are important, that they can do a lot for their health, that they can take their health into their own hands, that they can understand many processes. I think this is very valuable, and that's exactly how I work. And that's how I work. I've already had nearly 15,000 people come through my office over the years, of course.
Dorotka, listen, maybe you could give us a little advice in a different direction. Because when someone has health problems, obviously extracts will be helpful. But here, let's talk about prevention. Because preventive care is the foundation, so we don't allow various disorders to develop. And we all have some imbalances. Well, we live in a world where things definitely affect us. Stress affects us, the environment, and different situations. For example, someone might say, well, nothing really bothers me right now, just some minor things, like we all think if it doesn't hurt that much, if it's not that bothersome, I can still live with it. Others have it worse. And such a person wants to start taking care of themselves from today, which will make us very happy that they want to take care of their health. And there will always be this question when it comes to cannabis. How do you start using it? Do you have a specific routine that you recommend? At the beginning, start with this kind of dosage, use it in this and that way, maybe even a specific product, because you know, Dorotka, the choice is huge here. And a person who has never used it before or even has but wants to try a really good product would be happy to listen if you can recommend something, saying that for sure at the beginning, I recommend using it in this and that way.
Natalia, thank you so much for bringing up this topic because, again, maybe a bit indirectly, but I have to say that I am very often associated, me and my products, with situations when someone is already on the edge between life and death. And prevention, well, hardly anyone really thinks about it seriously, but it's very close to my heart because I know very well that it's better to prevent than to cure. It's better to take care of yourself earlier than to later just risk everything and simply try to save your life. That's why I've also been running this kind of activity for many years, also in the field of prevention. And I offer products for everyone that don't require any consultation or any special approach. What needs to be done? Well, you just need to buy it and start using it. And now products like our rituals are an example of that. This is actually a fantastic concept because we have rituals for a good mood. And this is a preparation that combines low concentrations of CBD and CBG, which are cannabidiol and cannabigerol, which actually gives us stabilization of the stress axis, gives us great immunity over time, balances our endocannabinoid system, gives us it's like an insurance policy. I call it an insurance policy for a good life. And the companion to rituals for a good mood is rituals for a good night's sleep. And here, very often people have no idea at all that even when they're sleeping, they're not necessarily sleeping well, because that sleep is ineffective, because a person sleeps for 7 to 8 hours, but wakes up in the morning feeling like they were digging ditches all night. So rituals for a good night's sleep is again a combination of a microdose of CBD, and here the highlight is a microdose of organic melatonin, which doesn't shut down our body's own processes. It doesn't shut down the production controlled by the pituitary gland and hypothalamus. It only gently, subtly stimulates but allows you to sleep perfectly, and we have plenty of evidence showing how it works. So this duo, rituals for a good mood plus rituals for a good night's sleep, just gives us great, absolutely great well-being. And I can brag a little here that I have quite a few friends in such circles. People who are busy, business-oriented, and in academic circles often say that they can't do without it anymore. It's simply a must, and I can recommend it to anyone. You really don't need any consultation. How should you dose it? Rituals for a good night's sleep always right before bed, and rituals for a good mood always in your pocket. And we simply take a drop or two under the tongue whenever we feel we might start feeling worse. Or, for example, when we're going to an important meeting or we have to meet someone to discuss a project, or simply when starting the day, you can always have it on hand. It's an inexpensive product and I wholeheartedly recommend it. I simply use it myself on a regular basis. The second product, the second duo I would recommend is a duo called Senior Care, but it's not just for seniors. Senior Care comes in a daytime and a nighttime version. It's a duo that was developed with the needs of seniors in mind, especially those struggling with what's called multiple chronic conditions. So it's a very safe formulation, even for people who are taking different medications. It's a mix of herbs, not just cannabis alone, that helps stabilize our mood and affects the regulation. I want to emphasize regulation, not lowering or raising of blood pressure, and it also helps regulate our hormonal balance, so we simply feel good. We have ashwagandha in there, we have other herbs as well, so it's really great for overall well-being. And at night, exactly the same principle applies. For people who struggle with multiple health conditions and, for example, maybe taking various medications or supplements, it's a very safe product. And here comes the real highlight. The best advocate for this supplement is my 25-year-old daughter, who used it throughout her studies and says, "Mom, it's just amazing." Any moment now, I don't know when this program will air, but on December 15th, we've scheduled the premiere of our newest supplement, which is called Mitoharmony System. This is a supplement that provides broad, high-level support for the whole body, but it is more focused on calming, stabilizing mood, and addressing sleep quality problems, among other things. And of course, it is also based on hemp, but not only that. What is the key to this product, Magnolia officinalis, that is honokiol and magnolol? So, to sum up, rituals, Senior Care Day and Senior Care Night, and we can't forget the huge number of women. And for women, we have prepared a product called Femina. And it's simply my favorite product. It's used to alleviate all kinds of problems that women struggle with, both during puberty and during perimenopause and menopause. It's a product that will help relieve both PMS symptoms and menopausal symptoms, such as hot flashes. This is 10% CBD, which is made from a blend of hemp that gives us a terpene profile. Terpenes are what we smell. They're scents, but they have a huge therapeutic effect. Aromatherapy, we know about that. And it primarily affects female hormones. As you can see, Natalia, there are many preparations. It's not that only people who are terminally ill, like my son was, come to us, but everyone will find something for themselves. And I wouldn't be myself if I didn't mention that we have wonderful, truly fantastic skincare products. We have this oil that massage therapists use, and I, unfortunately or fortunately, am a huge fan of therapeutic massages. All the massage therapists I've worked with just love these massage oils. These oils were created more with the idea of supporting the skin, for example, after radiotherapy. So they also contain a very high concentration of CBD. However, they have great glide, excellent regenerative properties for the epidermis. They moisturize very well, don't stain, and absorb really well. So they are truly worth recommending. Well, I simply invite you to visit our website because everyone can find something for themselves there.
Great, Dorotka. I will definitely put the link in the description under the video so people can use it. We'll also give them a discount so they can get it a bit cheaper if they buy through that link. But I also want to ask you about that again, because we've talked a lot about how important it is how you use it, how many times a day, and how many drops a person should use. So first of all, these preventive oils, for example, for seniors, how do you recommend using them? In what amounts? How many drops should you start with? How often?
These blended preparations, the ones intended for preventive use, are very straightforward. They contain more than just hemp, which is why they can be used once or twice a day. For example, in the case of preparations for seniors, we have one for the day and one for the night. So we use the day preparation in the morning and the night preparation in the evening, which means twice a day. Very simple. As for the dosage, we generally recommend that it should be no more than 6 pumps with the dispenser. There's a little atomizer, a small pump. There's 0.25 milliliters in one pump, but I always recommend the start low, go slow method. So we start with a small dose and slowly increase it, but we observe our own body while doing so. So we don't have to follow the recommendation of 6 pumps, because if 1 or 2 pumps bring us satisfaction and we feel a difference in our body, then there's no point in doing more. It's the same with products like rituals. We always start with 1 drop and look for the right dose. Looking for it means simply increasing the dose. I don't know what your body is like or how it will respond. I only know mine. I know how much I need. And now the only difference, the only exception to the start low rule, meaning starting with a low dose, is rituals for a good night's sleep. I believe that if we don't sleep through the night, well, sleep won't come back. A sleepless night is a lost night. So at first we take rituals for a good night's sleep at a higher dose. If we get a good night's sleep, then we can reduce the dose later. We won't do any harm with this. You should remember that cannabis itself is actually very safe. If the preparations are safe, then the therapy will be safe, but there is always a but. If someone intends to use it for more than just prevention, because I assume that someone who wants prevention is not using treatment, they don't get 5 different medications because they only want prevention. They're not a sick person. And such a person can calmly experiment with cannabis. They don't need any consultation. They don't need any support. Honestly, they can find out everything in our store chat. But if someone intends to support their main therapy because they're being treated for some condition, then I recommend a consultation because there could be a harmful interaction. Cannabis itself won't cause harm, but cannabis combined with a certain medication can be dangerous because the substance itself can be dangerous. Cannabis can either slow down the elimination of a given compound from the body or speed up its elimination. If we slow it down, it may turn out that dose after dose we end up overdosing on a given medication. On the other hand, if cannabis speeds up the metabolism of a given substance, it may turn out that the medication won't have the intended effect because it will simply be eliminated from the body more quickly. So these are situations worth considering, and there's no need to be afraid because there are specialists who know how to manage this.
Okay, great, Dorotka. Thank you very much. Well, maybe just to wrap up, although you've already given us a lot of very important information, but maybe just as a summary, any one piece of advice for the listeners?
One piece of advice for the listeners. Above all, you have to love yourself. When you love yourself, you stop being afraid, and you also stop being afraid of cannabis. The cure for fear is knowledge, so I encourage you to deepen your knowledge, to watch channels like yours, Natalia, to visit my channel, to attend trainings and lectures, to read books. There's a lot of that too. Simply put, the heart is like an oscillator. Either we are afraid or we love. So I prefer to love, and then there is no fear.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dorotka, for coming, for sharing your experience and your knowledge. I think our viewers will benefit from this. Everyone's invited. The link is in the description below the video, both to Dorotka's website and to the store. Educate yourselves and take care of your health. See you next time.
Thank you so much. See you next time.